The delivery room fell into a stunned silence only 2 hours after a little girl entered the world. While exhausted nurses smiled and congratulated the new parents, the baby's father stood frozen beside the hospital bed, staring at the tiny child wrapped in a pale pink blanket. Then, without touching her, without even taking one step closer, he slowly backed away. His face turned ghostly white, his hands trembled, and he whispered that he couldn't hold her before walking out of the room, leaving his wife with a broken heart and 1,000 terrifying questions. In one devastating moment, what should have been the happiest day of their lives became the beginning of a mystery that threatened to destroy their family before it had even begun. If you believe in kindness, forgiveness, hope, and second chances, please like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone you care about, and subscribe to our channel to help our community continue sharing emotional stories that remind us never to give up on the people we love. Harper Caldwell had dreamed about becoming a mother since she was a little girl. After 4 difficult years of infertility treatments, painful disappointments, and endless doctor's appointments, she and her husband, Grant Caldwell, had almost accepted that parenthood might never happen. Then came the miracle they had stopped expecting. Their daughter arrived healthy, beautiful, and perfect on a bright spring morning as sunlight streamed through the hospital windows. Harper expected tears of joy from Grant. She expected laughter, hugs, and photographs that would become treasured family memories. Instead, she watched the man who had cried when they first heard the baby's heartbeat suddenly become someone she barely recognized. His eyes filled with fear instead of happiness, and before she could ask what was wrong, he disappeared. The nurses tried to comfort Harper by suggesting that many fathers became overwhelmed after witnessing childbirth. Her own mother, Lorraine, insisted Grant probably needed a little time to collect himself. Everyone seemed eager to explain away what had happened, but Harper knew her husband too well. This wasn't simple panic. This wasn't nervousness. Something inside him had shattered the moment he looked at their daughter. As the hours passed, Grant never returned to the room. He answered one text with only a few words saying he needed some air. Harper stared at those words until they blurred through her tears. Every possibility entered her mind. Perhaps he regretted becoming a father. Perhaps he had stopped loving her. Perhaps there was another woman. Each explanation hurt more than the last. The following morning, the early sunlight painted warm golden patterns across the hospital room. Harper had barely slept. Their daughter rested peacefully in the bassinet beside her bed, completely unaware that her family already seemed to be falling apart. Harper was preparing herself for the possibility that Grant might never return when the door slowly opened. Grant stepped inside looking as though he had aged 10 years in a single day. His clothes were wrinkled, his eyes swollen from crying, and in his hands he carried a thick, weathered envelope covered with faded handwriting. Before Harper could ask where he had been, he carefully placed the envelope beside her and finally looked directly at their daughter. His entire body trembled. Then he quietly reached into the bassinet, lifted the baby with extraordinary gentleness, and held her against his chest as tears poured freely down his face. Everything changed in that single moment. Harper watched in complete confusion as Grant whispered silent apologies while rocking their tiny daughter. The fear that had consumed his face the previous day had been replaced with overwhelming grief and unconditional love. She knew there was a story behind those tears, one he had carried alone for decades. Grant slowly opened the envelope. Inside were photographs, newspaper clippings, and an old birth certificate. He explained that he had grown up believing his younger sister, Eleanor, had died shortly after birth because that was the story his father had repeated throughout Grant's childhood. Their family never spoke about her again. Any questions were met with anger and silence. 6 months before Harper became pregnant, Grant's father passed away. While cleaning his father's home, Grant discovered the hidden envelope inside an old wooden chest. He hadn't opened it immediately because the grief of losing his father had been overwhelming. Only the previous afternoon, after seeing his own newborn daughter for the first time, something had compelled him to finally read its contents. The truth shattered everything he believed. Eleanor had never died. She had been born with a distinctive strawberry-shaped birthmark stretching gently across her left shoulder. Grant's father believed the mark was a sign of terrible misfortune. Influenced by cruel family superstitions passed down through generations, he secretly surrendered Eleanor for adoption only days after she was born while telling everyone she had died from medical complications. Grant's mother had never recovered emotionally from losing her daughter and passed away years later believing the heartbreaking lie. When Grant first looked at his newborn daughter, he froze because she carried the exact same strawberry-shaped birthmark in the exact same place that it wasn't. Fear of his daughter. It was the crushing realization that history had reached across generations. The tiny mark instantly brought back forgotten childhood memories of overheard arguments, unanswered questions, and his mother's endless sadness. Grant hadn't walked away because he rejected his daughter. He walked away because he suddenly understood the greatest betrayal his family had ever hidden. Harper silently held his hand as he finished telling the story. Instead of anger, she felt immense compassion for the frightened little boy Grant once was and for the broken man trying desperately not to let the past poison the future. Together they decided that their daughter would never inherit generations of silence. Before leaving the hospital later that afternoon, Grant made an unexpected decision that he wanted to find Eleanor. The search lasted several weeks, filled with official paperwork, adoption agencies, and countless dead ends. More than once they believed they had reached another impossible wall. Still, Grant refused to stop. Every smiling glance from his daughter reminded him that somewhere another innocent child had once been separated from her family through fear and ignorance. Eventually an adoption agency uncovered a record leading to a small coastal town. Eleanor, now known as Claire Weston, had built a quiet life as a librarian. She had never known the truth about her birth family. Her adoptive parents had loved her deeply, but both had passed away years earlier, leaving many unanswered questions behind. When Grant wrote his first letter, he expected rejection. Instead, several weeks later, a handwritten reply arrived. Claire admitted she had always wondered where she came from. She had never imagined a brother had spent decades believing she was dead. Their first meeting took place on a bright summer afternoon in a peaceful public garden filled with blooming flowers and laughing children. Harper held the baby while Grant nervously waited near a fountain. When Claire appeared, Grant recognized her instantly, not because they shared facial features, not because of photographs, but because sunlight briefly revealed the familiar birthmark near her shoulder as the breeze gently moved her cardigan. Neither sibling rushed forward dramatically. Years of lost time could never be erased in a single embrace. Instead, they simply stood looking at one another, each trying to recognize pieces of themselves reflected in a stranger. Then Claire smiled, Grant smiled back, the distance between them disappeared. Harper quietly watched as brother and sister hugged for the first time in their lives while their daughter reached tiny hands toward the aunt she had unknowingly reunited with her family. Over the following months, healing happened slowly. There were painful conversations about the past, there were tears over birthdays missed, holidays never shared, and parents who could no longer answer difficult questions. There were moments of anger toward Grant's father, but there were also moments of unexpected grace. Claire chose not to spend the rest of her life imprisoned by bitterness. She honored the parents who had lovingly raised her while also embracing the family she never knew existed. Grant attended counseling to process decades of hidden trauma. Harper discovered that sometimes the strongest families are not those without pain but those willing to face pain honestly instead of burying it. As their daughter grew, the strawberry birthmark became nothing more than a unique part of who she was. No one ever hid it. No one treated it as shameful. Instead, Grant kissed it every morning, reminding his little girl that every part of her was worthy of love. Family photographs soon filled their home. In the center of nearly every picture stood Claire laughing beside Harper while Grant proudly carried his daughter on his shoulders beneath bright blue skies. Visitors often noticed the birthmark and asked innocent questions. Grant never looked away anymore. He simply smiled and explained that sometimes the smallest marks carry the biggest stories, and those stories deserve to be told with love instead of fear. Years later, during the little girl's first day of school, Harper watched Grant kneel beside their daughter before she walked through the classroom doors. He reminded her that courage wasn't the absence of fear but the decision to love anyway. Harper realized those words weren't only meant for their daughter. They were the promise Grant had made to himself on the day he finally chose to hold her. The hospital room where everything almost fell apart became one of their favorite memories, not because of the pain they experienced there, but because it marked the day their family chose truth over silence, compassion over judgment, and healing over generations of hidden wounds. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, Leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today. And subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey. Before you go, please leave a meaningful comment telling us whether you believe forgiveness can heal even the deepest family wounds, or share a moment when hope changed your own life. As Harper, Grant, Claire, and one extraordinary little girl walked hand in hand beneath the warm afternoon sun, they proved that love is not measured by the mistakes of yesterday but by the courage to embrace tomorrow. Sometimes the greatest miracle isn't simply the birth of a child. Sometimes the greatest miracle is the birth of truth, because when truth is finally met with love, even the oldest scars can become the foundation of a family's brightest future.